parts of it or whatever? What?
Don't tell Dave I'm gonna hit of him. Either he's the real deal or he's a false Messiah, doing signs and wonders.
Yeah,
And when I say the real Messiah, I don't mean according to the Hebrew Bible.
right.
I mean, but yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Where? What?
That Netflix.
Seriously.
No, we don't see that. We not sophisticated enough to.
I borrow off my daughter's Netflix, or I wouldn't have it either.
Okay, it's live.
We wouldn't even
Is
know how
that
to
come in
do
over
that.
the antenna?
It's live. Yeah, we do a
Yeah.
family share like that too.
It's on the way, yeah.
Oh, it's live now, but nothing's coming on the watch live. Yeah, it is.
Listen, you heavens, and I will speak. Let the earth hear the words of my mouth. For they will fall as rain from the sky, and as dew on the grass they will lie. For I will proclaim the name of Yahweh and tell of what rightly is His. For His works are faithful, His words are true. Ki la'olam chasdo.
I think they can hear us, but positive.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Is anybody out there?
Can you hear us
One
now?
setting I couldn't say.
Is anybody out there?
Okay, y'all.
Good?
Or in the words of folks from
We're not
Hawaii,
gonna speak.
aloha oi.
All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And we assume that we are ready to go and that everything's working properly. How's it going today? Everybody all right?
It's a beautiful sunny day.
It is beautiful here. Hopefully, it's beautiful where you guys are as well. I know we have people listening in from all over. So, what are some of you thinking? Anybody have any
Oh, wow.
ideas on today's class or
Oh, wow.
about the Exodus? The Exodus.
About being redeemed to serve
Yep.
Yahweh. And so I had a question about that
All right.
because I know you use the ASV and it says serve. My version said worship. So what's the deal there? Why was serve changed to
Yeah.
worship and vice
Well,
versa?
so the Hebrew is tied to the root avad, and avad can be translated to serve or to work. That's really what it means, to serve or to work. But even within those English definitions, there's a broad range of meaning. So, like, I can serve you a piece of pie. I can serve you a warrant. It generally has to do with give to someone something, and it requires you to do something in order. It's an active, participative thing.
Yeah.
So, worship is an English, theologically loaded word that is sometimes used in some authoritative English translations, but it's not there in the Hebrew. Because when I say worship, you might, depending on where you're coming from theologically, I mean, you might think worship is, praying with your hands uplifted or lying face down in worship or
singing praise
singing
and worship
praises.
songs.
Yeah, so service generally, vad, the verb, means to work or to serve. In fact, when man is created, he's created to serve the ground, basically, to work the ground.
How well I know that.
Yeah, see, so I think worship is not really, now there is another word that can be kind of tied to that, but in general, to serve means to work for, work on behalf of,
Yeah.
in that sense. So that's really, the Israelites were in servitude, in slavery to the Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And the whole point of the story is you're still going to be a servant. You're just not going to serve them, you're going to serve me. This is what the point is.
So, there was a discussion earlier about, and Miriam's talking about against their will,
Yeah,
becoming a slave, so to speak.
yeah,
There was a discussion about, how did they get into slavery? How did they get into the point of where they were not able to be free to leave,
yeah,
so to speak. And I think we kind of covered that in the fact that it wasn't really, it was a transfer of servitude.
yeah,
In other words, you can't serve God and man, so to speak. So
Yeah.
For his people to serve God, they have to be released and let go. In fact, even the Bible talks about, Moses saying, "We're going to go out and sacrifice and come back," so to speak. It was
Yeah.
implied anyway. I don't know whether that was actually the intent.
That's just like Assyria taking over Egypt, except it wasn't Assyria, it's God taking over his people from Egypt. So he conquered Egypt in order to get his people out. And when there's a conquering nation over somebody else, the people's got to serve the new
Right.
that's right.
owner.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's presented that way. In fact, we'll get into in future classes this idea that God is waging a war on those who oppress his people and on the gods of Egypt, if you will. So the whole point is this grand stage the children of Israel ended up in Egypt through the working of God in order there to become a great and mighty people. In fact, that's what spurs the whole story on. Remember, you see that the Pharaoh says, hey, this people's become plenteous, they're many, and if an enemy comes, they might team up with them. They're not really our people.
Yeah.
Notice how they're always them. They're never really
Versus us.
accepted in. And so that's a very, very troubling thing that brings about what ultimately leads to the oppression and humiliation and so forth. So there is our service to God is not forced. See, that's the difference to your point, Dave. It's like to Egyptians, to the Pharaoh and to the taskmasters, they didn't have a choice. I mean, they were cruelly oppressed and forced to work. Whereas God says, you're going to serve me, and it should be different, right? It should be a different idea.
I like that Marlene's comment there, because I was thinking the same thing when you were talking this morning. You know, using the Bob Dylan song.
Oh, yeah.
"Yes, sir,"
Yes, sir.
and
Yeah.
that you will.
Yeah, like he said, it might be the devil, it might be the Lord. Uh-huh.
Or Egypt, or
Yeah.
whoever, but you're gonna serve somebody.
Mhm.
I'd
So-
rather serve Jehovah than
That's right.
So, on this sojourner stranger,
Hmm.
what I want to get straight in my mind is how to follow Torah with the hot topic now, immigration.
Hmm.
How are we supposed, how are you supposed to deal with the people who would come into this country with an agenda to change it to their beliefs? I know I was reading in Israel, they would come in and they had the same, access to the laws as the natural born there. But then there was like a waiting period, generations. that you
We
had
have
to-
a process too, and
Yeah.
so a lot of people, and I would like to believe well-intentioned people have this idea. You're torn as a Bible-believing person. On the one hand, you read a poem by Emma Lazarus on the Statue of Liberty. Give me your
Yeah.
huddled masses, let them come. And then you also are aware that we're a nation of laws, and we do have policies which allow people to come in and be welcomed citizens.
It's always changed a little bit here and there. I mean,
Yeah.
according to the period of time that they've allowed people to come in, they've
Yeah.
stopped people from coming in when it got
Yeah.
to a point.
Well, also, all those people that came over on boats to Ellis Island, all of them didn't get to come in.
No.
They put a bunch of them on boats and sent them back.
If they had health issues that they could
Or
not,
other things.
or
Legal
criminal,
issues,
yeah.
whatever, yeah. They put them on the boat and sent them back.
but
That process has never been.
So I think the
But-
concept there is that if you're a stranger in
Yeah.
the land,
yeah,
you're not there to cause trouble. You're just somebody that's
Right.
in the land.
well,
And so-
I guess your heart breaks for the people who are trying to come here illegally because they're fleeing such horrific.
Well, it's a-
But
Now-
the reality of life is
Yeah.
you've got to have some way to
Yeah.
filter that through to
Yeah,
find
yeah,
out
yeah.
who those people are
yeah,
and separate them from the bad people.
yeah,
There's always a vetting process, even in biblical literature. Whenever someone seeks to come into your land, you have to have some sensibility there, and so and then, again, this is one of the touchy subjects of our day.
oh yeah,
But what we can't do, in my opinion, is we can't say, and Israel, by the way, doesn't do this either. Where they say, look, anybody and everybody, just come on in and, we'll set you up and help you out. You have to have some guidance here. You have to have structure and discipline, and you have to be able to secure borders. Look, again, I don't want to get into all sorts
Yeah.
of things that people
Right.
get crazy politically with. But the point is, the idea that we treat people who are not, like, I remember one time I was in New York in a taxi, and a guy with a heavy accent, clearly well, he probably is telling this story right now. There was a guy in my taxi with a heavy accent. He wasn't from here. But I remember he screams out his window at someone, "Go back to your country," and I was thinking, wow, it was just kind of, it's interesting because we are a melting pot. And the idea is that once someone becomes a person who is associated with our laws and our rules, see, notice there are all these references, more than 30 references about the stranger, a sojourner. They're accountable to our laws, biblically.
Yes.
So it says, like, if a person this is Hebraic biblical law. If a person blasphemes, this is the penalty, whether one is homeborn or a stranger sojourning in your midst.
One law.
The one law covers it all. Now, a lot of people take that to the extreme, but the point is that there are legislative pieces within the Torah that must be adhered to for someone to have a sojourning status. Now, the U.S. is not perfect. Our government is not perfect. I know some of you may think it is. Nor is the Israeli government, nor is any government of man. But rule of law is something that extends from the biblical period up into our period. In addition to that, if we have people who are fleeing from bad situations and they reach the border, there ought to be, to the best of our ability, a way to help in some way. This is my view. Now, that might be a ministry of some sort, and we know that they exist, but the government does have processes, to expedite in certain situations.
But you're talking about the taxi driver yelling out the window, "Go back to your country," it reminds me of some of my older family members that, they immigrated from Ireland during the potato famine. But then they forgot. I remember as a child learning about Martin Luther King and so on. And I remember how prejudiced some of those family members were. And it's like, don't you remember, you went through this.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's like, you're only removed one generation, and here you are acting like.
Great point.
Yeah.
And I've used this example before. I have 6 kids, and when the older one picks on the next one, and you say, "Don't do that," they may not be able. You may not be able to say, "Remember how you feel when somebody." But by the time you get to number 3 child, you tell number 3 child, "Don't pick on number 4 child, because remember when number 2 child picked on you and how that made you feel." And they're going to do it anyway.
Right.
But people generally, quite often, this is passed on, this abuse, this oppression.
They learn it.
And the Torah seeks to eliminate, the Torah seeks to eliminate these prejudices and these hateful treatment of others. That's one of the things that it really tries to put out.
So I think to try and address that, like to Sherry's point, is like, once certain groups of people get into the country, they're still a stranger in the country.
Yeah.
Those are the strangers that ought to be addressed the way the Torah says.
Yeah.
In other words, the management of a country, not just the U.S., but every country has processes for their borders and all that. But when they admit people that aren't natives or not citizens of that land, then those are the strangers among you until such time as they become part of that. So it's like the people of Muslim extraction that come to the United States that are here legally. They needed to be treated, with as much respect as anybody.
Of
And
course.
the Jewish community seeks to do that as well, with the Muslim faction here in the United States.
Well, and religion aside, the idea, and even if you take it from the perspective and remove the stranger aspect or the slave aspect, treatment of others with kindness and, with care, the Bible takes up for, let's put it that way, those who can't take up for themselves. The Bible's very, very clear. The Torah is very specific about take care of widows and orphans, the poor. In other words, if you're gleaning your field, and it says don't keep going over and over the tree until it's totally picked of fruit. Leave some for those who are poor in the land, that they might also be blessed.
And allow them to get it.
And allow them to get it, yeah. Leave the ladder out there by the tree. Let them pick a bit. And if someone's walking through your field, they're able to eat what they need, but they're not allowed to walk in with, a tractor with a bucket truck behind it pulling.
I love how, remember we visited the farm
Yeah.
in the desert
We're here to
in
harvest.
Israel?
Yeah.
And that farmer said, I'm sorry you're late because we leave a certain amount. It was mangoes.
Yeah.
I said, and you can go in and pick them up.
Right. Yeah, so there's this idea that I think is the main point. It's never be greedy to the point that you don't leave some to help those who need it. And we ought to think about ways to apply that. I'm not saying, we ought to come up with hard, fast rules, but, John, for instance, one time he was somewhere and became like really aware of this particular point about the needy among us, and we collected some canned goods. This is the kind of thing that you can do anywhere, anytime, and think about those that otherwise are sort of outcast and downtrodden.
Yeah, because a lot of us don't have fields anymore that we're raising stuff in.
Yeah.
Right.
But we do have incomes where we have disposable, we
Yeah.
set some aside,
Yeah.
for, our religious perspective and also to help others.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the U.S., for all of our faults, and a lot of civilized nations, have systems in place to take care of the poor and the needy. And again, without wading too deep in, there are systems where those who, for instance, who are impoverished, who their children need lunches. We have programs within school. We have government-funded programs. There are ways a lot of these can be abused, of course, but a lot of them are good in the thinking. How do we as a people, as an organization, United Israel, or as a town or a country, how is it that we take care of the needs of people?
And
You
so,
know?
See, and to augment that, the food banks do a lot of work, which is
Exactly.
not really government run.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna flip this a little bit. So the lawgivers and the law upholders.
Yeah.
And so you have lawyers. Now, are lawyers a good thing or a bad thing? Somebody that you can go to have your thing. Such as, okay, leave the corners of your field. Well, why not just get a round field?
Yeah.
Don't have any corners in it. So, you could get around the law. My point is.
Because your ox can't
Yeah.
make those turns like
Right,
that.
right. My point is, we ought to do this from the heart. We ought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This stuff, all these laws and these things, people were asking, well, is it in the land or is it out of the land and so forth? But that's being a lawyer. You
Yeah.
know, that-
Yeah, you're saying follow the principles.
Principles.
principle.
That's right.
And the intent.
Yeah.
Intent,
The intent.
which
Yeah.
is a legal term.
Yeah, we have to think about, because people could say, well, this applies only to Israel. This applies only to the
Doesn't apply
priests.
to
This
me.
applies only to, we can do that until we relieve ourselves of any moral responsibility.
Right.
But I think what we ought to be doing is looking for ways to apply
do it.
in
Yeah.
principle,
Yeah.
to your
Right.
point, Dave.
Right.
Get our intent right and say, look, I can't change everything, but I can change this one thing, or I might not be able to save the world, but I can save this
somebody's
person's
world.
world.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. How do you do that? That's the
That's
trick.
right.
And I want to think that a lot of developed countries and so forth are looking for ways to do that. One friend of mine told me one time the tithing system. This particular person said, well, I don't tithe, to my religious organization, because biblically that's only goes to the Levites and and so
then-
forth.
Then, so many years and so forth. It's
Yeah.
not like every.
But if they really studied it, they would realize that you had three different tithes, at least three different
least three,
tithes,
yeah.
and they were for different purposes and so forth. And then on top of that, in principle, if you look at how much you pay in taxes,
Right.
in some way, if you really break it down,
It's a time.
you're giving a lot of a percentage of what you bring in
Yeah.
for these programs.
Yeah, medical care in this country is like 25% of the gross national product. I mean, it's, or whatever that, however they word it. I'm not a lawyer in that area. But
And-
it's a big chunk of our government's money is spent on health care for the poor.
But remember before, like the Great Depression,
Sure. I mean, I don't
poor
remember it, but-
people were just at the mercy of whoever. And then what? A righteous act was enacted by Congress and the president. The WPA program, the Conservation Corps, all of these. There are still parks and businesses and places, schools and things that are still standing.
Yeah, a
in
lot
order
of these
to put men
programs.
to work.
A lot of these programs start off with
Yeah.
the best of intentions, and and then you have some people who say, "Look, I agree with the principle, but I don't need the government
That's right.
driving this." That's a reasonable
Just a
argument.
replacement thing, caring for the poor. It started out, it used to be a church thing. The churches would come together.
Church and
take care of that, and they
communities,
still
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the government didn't mess with you on that.
Yeah.
So we kind of replaced that. The government said, no, we're going to come in and do this better. And,
Yeah.
So did it let the churches off the hook, so to speak?
yeah. I don't think we can ever relieve ourselves of the responsibility to
Right.
do good, like Miriam said in a nutshell. Treat people the way you would like others to treat you.
That's right.
And always remember what it feels like to be that outcast, or to be, if you can imagine it. Most of us at some point in our life have been the outsider,
Yeah.
the other, I think if we can just think, and if you've never been treated badly, imagine, what would I feel like if I were the person who was ostracized, who was not let in? I think that's kind of the point, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to stress this idea that servitude and being a sojourner was part of their early history, followed up with never forget this. Why? Because I want you to treat people differently. And a lot of times, some of our hardest lessons, but some of our best lessons, are the ones that we learn through the tough times in our life.
I thought about that when you were talking. One of the thoughts that came to my mind was, as humans, and I don't care what country you are, if you walk upright and we all look different, but we have different shades, we're still people,
Yeah.
still humans.
That's right.
We, as humans, always have to do things the hard way.
Yeah,
We never
Seems
do
that
it the
way.
easy way.
yeah.
I don't care what nationality you are. We never do it easy. We always have to be difficult. And the Creator recognizes that trait among us. Now, you got people that for 400 years they were in slavery. So they learned a lesson. It took 400 years. Then all of them got out of Egypt and they went 40 years in the desert. Why? Because they were hard-headed and they wouldn't comply. And so, like we were talking about before, only 2 or 3 of that group ever actually got to go into the land.
Might have been the reason why they got put in that position in the first place in Egypt, because they got hard-headed and started to do stuff against the government.
Well, Pharaoh was hard. I mean, humans are that way,
Yeah, you can almost look at the characters in the story and see traits that we all could fall victim to.
Yeah.
We can either be the abused or we could be the abuser. The point is, try not to be the abuser,
Break the cycle.
but break the cycle, yeah. And the only way to do that is combating bad with good.
And you can't really look at it in the literal sense. I'm reminded of one of the YouTube posts, but I'm reminded of the flood that we've worked in.
Yeah.
And at one point, we got some help. Me and you got some help from a Protestant church
We did.
with supplies. It was very, very helpful. But they don't serve the same God we serve, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it
Yeah.
out there like that. One of our posters wanted to know about that. What if a ministry that is doing these good things, but they're preaching a wrong God? So to
Yeah.
speak? How are we supposed to deal with that?
I tell you, I think it's commendable anytime humans treat other humans with decency.
Right.
Yeah.
To your point,
Yeah.
Dave and I were riding around and we would meet these different groups and they would be cooking up something. Sometimes we couldn't eat it because it was something we didn't eat.
Right.
But
Buckets of stuff.
oh yeah, but they were supplying, and what their point was is how can we help? How can we help? No one asked Dave and I when we showed up,
Right.
as ragged as we looked,
Right.
what church do y'all go to? What religious?
What do you believe?
What do you believe? Do you believe in this, or this? They would say, how many buckets of cleaning supplies do you need?
Right.
Or, hey, can you trade me? I need a shovel. Can you? You give me a shovel, I'll give you this. People work together, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever been part of.
Now, on the other hand, if we'd have been out there trying to help people, and we only helped those that fit our
Yeah,
thought process there,
yeah,
and we didn't help those, we helped the ones, we went and found the ones that we favored.
yeah.
No matter how much help we did, it would have been zero.
That's
It would
right.
have been zero help. Our intent was wrong.
Yeah,
Our intent was to help people, not form a religion or improve
right.
our religion. So, but a lot of churches do that.
and
Yeah.
so I do think there is this idea, because people a lot of times will look to help somebody in another country and ignore somebody right next door. So we-
Indian proverb, they're flying over a
Yeah.
church to build a church.
Yeah, that's right. If you have people, within your own family, within your own town, that needs help, there's really no sense in sending your funds and resources to another country if you do it by way of flying over them to get help to someone. I mean, look, there are enough needs in our immediate lives that we can find a way to be helpful. And I'm preaching to myself here. I mean, we ought to look internally and build out from there. It's the old flying on the airplane. In the event of a loss of cabin pressure, from the ceiling will drop a
Put
mask.
yourself
Put your
first.
mask on first, then help other people.
And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with traveling and going and seeing other lands at all. It's to do good deeds. There's nothing wrong with
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, the Torah is very demanding of us, though, and I think at times it does touch on subjects that make us a little uncomfortable. I mean, you could get into a lot of these texts in the Torah and go, "Wow," it's like if your enemy's ox, you need to stop and it's like it pushes you. You ought to read that and go, "My enemy's ox," I mean, we all have people who, well, I don't know if all of us do, but I know I do. I have people that don't like me, believe it or not. And I'm commanded, to help them in times of need. It doesn't mean that I should, go out of my way to, because people always then go to the extreme. Well, what about somebody who is,
Taking advantage of you?
yeah. So
That's
I
a
mean,
tough one.
be sensible, but help those that you can help is the main point. Treat people with dignity and respect. So if you notice, I notice some of the comments, like Jack says, a nation cannot survive without unity of laws and religion. Immigrants need to have the mentality of Ruth. She thought of Israel's God in ways were going to be her new, and in other words, God's ways were going to be her ways. Very, very good, solid point.
Yep.
What does she say? Ruth says, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God, my God." It is an attitude of joining with.
I'm sticking with you.
Yeah, Ruth didn't say, this really is a great example. Ruth didn't say, I tell you what, I'm a Moabite and I kind of want to live where you live, but I'm going to bring Chemosh and some of the gods of Moab, and I'd like you to consider coming. I'm going to start a Moabite church here, and I'd like for you to be part of my church, that kind of thing. See, it's not that at all. It's more of, I want to be part of this people and so forth. So there's that, as we say, there is that. And I think that's important.
Yeah, immigrants need to have the mentality of Ruth. That's really good. It really is. Did you really think about that? And that's part of America's immigration issue right now is come over here and join up with us, and learn the language and.
But no, we're not doing that.
I know we're not.
It's come on over and you can speak your language,
Yeah.
and we'll have to figure out a way to.
Right, we can just push one on our telephone. Get
Yeah.
in,
Well, but they also,
But then again,
just to know that in the ancient world, within the land of Israel, we have evidence of people who retained somewhat their cultural identity. And we have multilingual things going on.
Right.
We've discovered
Right.
that archaeologically. But having said that, there is this idea, America is this great experiment, if you
Right.
will, where it's a great experiment.
it is.
Can it work? Can we truly be a melting pot? And,
So far,
and
yeah.
I think
allow
melting
for
pot may be
freedom?
the wrong word, more like a salad.
Yeah, maybe so.
But no, humans always want to group together with like kinds. I mean, that's,
But the thing
That's
is,
not the
as
right
they
way.
group,
Can I
as
take that back?
people,
No.
as people group together, though, there's intermarriages and all kinds of things. You see that in the United States.
Well, but a lot of times culturally, people will go towards their cultural, like,
yeah,
you
that's
know,
what I meant.
they'll
yeah.
hang out, the Indians will hang out with the Indians, and you
Yeah.
go where you're comfortable.
Yeah.
And
But
you
over
form
time that
community
changes.
You
based
have
on-
community
yeah.
based on.
Over time, that changes. Though you can see that in the United States, as different groups come
That's what's
in, they
happened.
stick together, and then after a while, they separate out and they intermingle with the others, and it becomes
I
a
mean,
totally different thing.
And I don't have a problem with religious freedom. If you wish to
Sure.
follow your religious laws and things like that within your household, that's fine. I have no problem with that. It's when you come in and say, my religion says you must do this.
Yeah.
Right.
And therefore, in order for you not to offend me, you must follow my
Yes.
religious laws.
And that
That-
goes both ways,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So I think the older I get, I,
think that's
love
stipulated somewhere
freedom
in the
is one of the
Constitution.
things that I
Free
truly
choice is
love.
a good thing.
And so we want, in a society in which we live in this culture, I don't want some Torah Taliban group, some hardcore person that's going to stone me in the street. I mean, look, there's some things in the Torah that are just difficult for me to go with, so especially given the way things are right now. I wanted to read this comment. Alyssa Cantley. Hello, Alyssa. What a fascinating discussion is often the talk in our home. How do we give and leave our four corners of production for the poor, widow, and orphan, keeping it in perspective to one's financial and physical ability? It is how a community cares and thrives for one another. Hashem explained a system that works for prosperity. Love hearing this discussion. I have met over time where people... I've seen it. I remember in one case, Dave, you remember that we got a check in the early days. Someone sent us a check for the ministry, and we happened to know that this situation, this person didn't have anything to send, but they felt like they had to. And it was sort of one of those things where we wrestled with it, and we prayed about it, we talked about it, we ultimately sent that back. Now, some might even be offended if they received it back, but we tried to word it in such a way that we said, you don't know how much this blesses us that you would contribute, but
We know.
and I don't remember how we said it. It wasn't to offend, But it was just that we have always felt like there are ways to help. And look, we need funds to do what we do. But we've always felt like you got to be careful there. People have been, it's been pushed on them that you give before you do anything else. I remember early in my religious quest where there was such a pressure to give before I even paid my bills,
That's right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Pay your
And-
tithes on your net. on
Yeah,
your-
you pay your tithes on your gross,
your
not your
gross.
net, yeah. We never want to be anything like that. But so take the organizational side of it out. There are, to Alyssa's point, opportunities within our own communities, within our own families, to help and to help one another. And I think it's not selfish to help ourselves and then help other people. Let's say Mark is loaded with money. And he's just a multimillionaire. Let's just play like it.
And I have plenty of dreidels too.
And if I'm dirt poor, this is not hard to imagine here. But and I know he's giving money to something else when he could be helping me. You see, my point is, it's not like I would say, "Hey, Mark," but we ought to look close to us first, and find ways to benefit. And then it doesn't have to be finances. Get off of that. There,
It can be physical contribution.
Acts of gifts and acts of service.
yeah.
Or even
Volunteer your
advice.
time.
If
Advice?
Go
yeah,
donate your time at one of those food
Time.
banks.
Time, yeah, time can be
you don't
Help
have
people,
to,
you know.
you don't have to buy the person a car so they can drive to their doctor's appointments. You can take them to their doctor's
Yeah.
appointments.
Acts of kindness. Sometimes people will be enriched by a kind word or just a decent act in their behalf. And you know, a lot of times I think that can be our dealings with people on the phone. I mean, there are just a lot of things going on in our world that we can just interact. And quite often, you're going to so surprise the person you're interacting with that it's going to change their day for the rest of the day. And, you know, think about it.
This has
Yeah.
happened to me. I think I've shared this story with you before that when Dave and I started out in landscaping, we had a small company. We were very small. And
Bigger
we-
than it is now, but I'm
and-
just saying.
And so the treatment you get in the industry when you go into these big nurseries or whatever, it's like
Right.
the big companies, they get preferential treatment,
Oh, yeah.
everything. And we're just kind of,
Mom
well,
and
that day, I mean, I remember another big landscaper just being so demeaning to me because I was a small unknown
Yeah.
company. I was a woman. And I was so dejected. And we went into this irrigation store. And you could tell these people were God-loving people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what religion, I'm sure they were Christian or whatever. But the way they treated us was so wonderful.
Yeah.
I felt like it was an answer to prayer. I left that business being encouraged, and I felt the difference just from the treatment, just from being treated with kindness
Yeah.
and respect.
And see, those are the things that we can remember too.
And I remember. So now
And you're
I
still
remember,
talking about it, yeah?
I remember when I was a stranger
Yeah.
to the industry and treated.
And that's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to apply a Torah principle
Yeah.
in this conversation, because we have opportunities every day to be that person. Don't be the bad guy. Don't be the oppressor. Don't be the humiliator. Don't be the don't be a jerk.
Lift,
It basically
lift
comes
people
down.
up. Don't knock
Yeah,
them down.
exactly.
Don't push them down. Lift
That's
people
right.
up.
Exactly.
That's the whole key.
Yeah.
And I tell my staff all the time, you treat everyone that walks in the door the same,
Yes.
Exactly.
the same.
Mm-hmm.
Greet them with a smile, ask if you can help them. And
I'm glad
I
you
don't-
put that caveat on there, cause some people are just naturally grouchy, so they could treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
Well, you know, treat them with respect
Yeah.
because I said, you know, you never know
What they've been going through.
or who they are.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you don't know who that bum who just walked through the door truthfully is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Yep.
so you're gonna,
I've,
you know,
I've always joked around that if I ever was wealthy, I would act totally poor.
Yeah.
Totally, all the time.
Yeah.
I'm always, it's just kind of a fantasy thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. If you ever get it, you
Yeah,
ever get
yeah.
loaded down.
raggedy blue jeans like I wear a lot of times, you know.
well,
Yeah.
you know, there's the old,
In other words, just be yourself.
Yeah,
there's the old saying, and
never gonna happen though.
my father raised me on this, that you treat the custodian the
Yeah.
same way you treat the CEO.
That's right. That's
You
right.
know, with the
You really
same
should.
respect.
Really should.
But always treat the butcher a little bit better. No,
I read a
present company
story.
excluded over us.
I read a story. You know, one of the verses that I quoted today is that God doesn't regard a person. You know, the idea is that He doesn't esteem a person higher. Like we tend to naturally look up to certain people in our world. God doesn't do that. He's not influenced by any of that. He doesn't look at the outside. He looks at the
We're all worth a
inside.
half
Remember the
shekel.
story of the all half shekel. But this idea, I read something on Facebook. Somebody posted a story. I don't know if it's true, but it was a good story. And the story was this: a church had hired a new pastor. They didn't meet the guy yet. The guy shows up.
Right.
But he does so incognito. He dresses like a bum. I mean, he stinks. He's dirty. His hair's all matted,
Yeah.
and he's, he just really, really doesn't fit into this environment. And of course, the doors open at the church, and he walks in, and an usher meets him. Now, this usher guides this person to the back, and sits him down and tries to give, is there anything we can do for you? Please sit here. Nice to have you, that kind of thing. So, but he's treated like this by everybody that he meets at this church. And when it's time to go to teach, he walks up right down the aisle in front of all these people and goes up to the podium and begins to talk about this idea that we're talking about. It's this: do you treat people the way that they ought to be treating, or do you categorize somebody and treat them poorly or badly?
Prejudge them.
And see,
Preferential
that's the idea that you're talking about, Linda. You never know. We have to be very careful because Dave just brought up something we talked about years ago. The evaluation or the valuation of a soul in the Torah was at half shekel. And it doesn't matter. And think about it. Even the king, Deuteronomy 17, the king is not to exalt himself above his brothers. He's not to have any special treatment, really. You can't multiply women or horses or silver, but he's not to even exalt his heart above his brothers. He's one of the boys, if you will. That's a valuable lesson. The Bible tries to put us in that state of mind where we don't exalt ourselves. We're all in this together. We're all serving God. Some of us have needs. Deuteronomy 15 says, if you do these things, there won't be any poor among you. And a few verses later it says, the poor are always going to be with you. Now that's a stark realization there. It's either saying, I think what it's really saying is you won't do these right.
Right.
Because we're always going to have the poor among us. And so there's always that opportunity to look for opportunity. I think that's the key.
And we all fail, so to speak. On one hand, I know I failed quite a bit on trying to help people. I just goof up, do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
It just happens, I don't mean to, but sometimes you do the wrong thing, so, I don't know. Whether
And
you're hurting or
sometimes-
helping,
Sometimes you're not helping, you're enabling.
Right.
Yeah, we have to think about
It's a tough one.
this world has, and it's getting more and more divisive. We have
Sure.
people who identify as this or that, meaning they say, I am Baptist or Orthodox or Reform or Catholic or Charismatic or Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative, or the list goes on and on and on. And I think the world would be better suited to say, we are in this together. Who among us needs help and who can help meet this need? If we could do that without all the checks, like, John, I would help you, but, I'm not big on helping this kind of person, It doesn't mean that we can help everybody. We can't help everyone with every need. But as needs arise for which we are equipped to help, that's what we ought to focus on. And I don't have the money to give
That's right.
people, but I got plenty of smiles. I can be a
Yes.
very positive influence. Sometimes that's worth its weight
Anita
in gold.
Sweet says, being kind is easy, costs nothing, and takes little effort.
Amen. Amen. Be kind. If nothing else, be kind. And sort of to misquote the doctor's oath, which I keep thinking about, it's if you can't help, don't hurt. And sometimes that's a big deal too.
You could phone a friend.
Yeah, that's
Your
right.
son would be able to straighten you out.
Yeah, he would. That's right.
There's a lot of opportunities out there, and there's a lot of needs in the world, but there's also a lot of opportunities,
Yeah,
and they vary dramatically.
yeah,
There's all different ways to be helpful, and sometimes you just have to pick one. Sometimes it's very simple. Years ago, I got corralled into helping out in one of the towns we lived in, doing Meals on Wheels.
yeah,
And went to some older gentlemen with meals and sat there while they ate and kept them company at their home because they couldn't get out and they were alone. They had
Yeah.
nobody, those type of things. It doesn't
Yeah.
cost anything to volunteer your time to take meals that
Yeah.
are prepared to somebody and sit there and talk with them while they're eating. 'Cause
yeah,
they're all alone in the world. You're
that-
the only person they may
yeah.
see that day.
yeah,
That reminds me of something that always tickled me, that when my mother and my stepdad were living in a elderly apartment for, like, they were just on a pension, very, enough to get by on, nothing extra, and they did Meals on Wheels. They were probably older than some of the people they
People,
delivered
yeah.
to,
Yeah.
but that was their way of doing what you're saying. It's like they would just
Help out, yeah.
they'd go to the Dale bread store and get real inexpensive bread and bring it to the community center
Yeah.
and hand it out. And I always thought that was so funny that Mom, you're probably older than some of those
Older
people, but
and-
it was wonderful.
Yeah.
They found their way
yeah.
to do something.
Yeah. And sometimes it just takes us just giving it a little creativity. I mean, we're willing to put creativity in a lot of the things that we do. If everybody, me included, thinks of this week, just take this week and take one day maybe and say, what could I do positive for somebody, And some of us might need to do something positive for ourselves. Build yourself up a little bit. Look, I'm not, I think a lot of people go overboard with this idea, but my point is, Dave and we were all talking years ago in this idea of love your neighbor as yourself. And Dave said, well, you kind of have to love yourself before that's understood the right way, because if you don't, then you're going to love somebody else. You don't even love yourself, and if you're going to love somebody else that way, no thank you. So, but I'm not trying to tell us to inflate our own self, but by some measure, we have to have some way to pass that on. And by all means, don't pass on the bad. That's the message today. You know what it's like to be poor, to be this, to be that, to be that. Don't treat others the way you were treated. We often take this in a positive way. I know how I want to be treated, so I'm going to treat other people that way. But if you've ever been treated badly, this is the reverse of that. Don't do that to other people. Don't ostracize people. Don't shut them out. Don't close the door in their face. I think that's the message. Remember, You were strangers, therefore you shall love the stranger. And remember, above all else, the point that I read today, God says that He loves the stranger. So whenever we get into this conversation, that's a big point to remember.
You gotta remember that.
And don't do people wrong, because how many times in the Torah alone does it say they might cry out to God and tell on you? You know, I don't want anybody calling out to God and say, you know what Ross did to me. You know, I don't want him to hear my name in a bad sentence. You know, I don't think any of us do. So that's something to think about as well.
Joanne says, remember not to forget. No, I'm sorry. That's Miriam. I'm getting comments.
Yeah.
Do not forget to comment on our annual conference coming up.
That's
And
right. Yeah, that's right. So we will make a mention of that as we sort of close out today. Think about this. If there's any way that you can attend the April conference, it's the last weekend of April in Charlotte, North Carolina. Our website now has the registration available and also a link to the registration page to book your room. They're separate. So if you book your room, it's all available on the United Israel page, unitedisrael.org, and you'll see the link. You'll see the big thing there that says Conference 2020. Go ahead and secure your place. There's no charge for the conference. We don't charge people for the conference. We do incur cost. So if people want to contribute, they can. And that's encouraged if you have the means to do so, but it's not required. No one's going to check you at the door and see. But it's going to be a nice weekend, and like I said, I messaged this morning the officers in our organization, and I kind of feel like we're going to associate the theme of the Exodus, with this year's conference. So anyway.
We're going someplace?
What's that? Yeah, that's right. All right, so you have a beautiful week, and many blessings to all of you. Let's all try to incorporate some of what we learned from the Torah this week.
Can I ask something about
Yeah.
the Torah?
Yeah.
That we didn't, that's not part of the lesson for today, but
All
it's
right.
a question that I saw. Who did Moses lead out of Egypt? It says all of Israel, right? But in this Torah portion, it says that only Simeon, Reuben, and Levi were let out.
What's the passage?
It's in a white space. Let's see.
Is it Exodus 6?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Exodus 6.
Yeah, that raised some questions in the scholarly community for sure.
I guess you could go with start at 6:13 or 6:14, and then it goes all the way to 6:20.
Yeah. So
I guess I lost my spot now.
yeah, it works all the way down to the family that produced Moses and Aaron. So it ends at 28. Is that where you're looking?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So the answer that's given in most commentaries is this. If you read the beginning that Mark's referring to in Exodus chapter 6, verse 14, these are the heads of their fathers' houses, and it starts off as if it's going to give you the whole shebang.
You're right.
Reuben, Simeon, and you work through. Well, really what it does is it begins with Reuben, then it
Chapter
goes
6.
to Simeon, then it goes to Levi, and it works down to Moses and Aaron. And then it stops. Now, a lot of people look at that and they go, wait a minute, what's going on here? In other texts, it indicates the other families, But in this case, what most scholars, what most students of Scripture say is the whole point of this is to bring up that there is this departure from Egypt, and this text brings us to the priestly family which produced Moses and Aaron. Is that a satisfactory answer? To some, it's not. Some say, well, we got a problem here, we're missing some of the tribes. But that's the answer that's usually given. Because, like I said, in other places it mentions not only all the tribes of Israel, but it also mentions the fact that there were mixed
Friends.
multitude.
Yeah. A few
from
friends
the
came along.
nations.
The tribes and others.
It just does seem odd that it was pointed out that just these are the ones that was led out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's so for those that missed it, he's looking at Exodus chapter 6, verse 14 through 28. They're set off by white spaces. And that is one of the questions. You know, and we can get into this here and there. There is this idea among the academic world. You know, you have the fundamentalist view that the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, are all written by the hand of Moses, and, you know, everything is, there's no problem, it's all one author. Most academics say that's not the case. It has several authors. Not really that we have time to get into that, but this argument, this point, comes out in some of those discussions. In fact, in Richard Elliott Friedman's book, he looks at the question of who actually came out of Egypt. And again, this is just me relating information, so no one online get all nervous. Just relax. But in this book, one of the questions that comes up about the Exodus is that according to the Torah, 603,550 males only, plus women, children, and so forth and so on, which puts us, rough estimate, at about 2 million people leaving Egypt. Most academics look at that and they go, ain't no way.
Well,
Ain't
how
no
long
way.
it would take them.
I mean, first of
From
all,
the
can
start
you
they left to the
imagine,
end of
this
that.
is their point,
Yeah.
can you imagine that many people crossing through the Red Sea in a night,
Or going to a football game now. Just
or going
imagine-
anywhere?
You know, just imagine, that's a lot of people.
So the question among the skeptics and the critics would say, maybe there is a historical core to the story, but it's not accurate as it's recorded. That's one of the answers.
So does that mean that, you know, God can open the river a little bit, but he can't open it wider?
Yeah, right. That's
Well-
that's my point. It's like,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
how limited
yeah,
is
come
he?
on now.
No. Good point. So the question is, how wide would it have to be? So the question would be, and this is what they bring up, if you imagine an LSU football game, how many people are in the LSU football stadium?
A lot.
100,000. 100,000
Yeah.
times how many is 2 million? So one of the criticisms is, and this is just one of the criticisms, is that if you were, say, 1,000 across,
Yeah.
by the time the first people got to Sinai, even if you put it like way far away, like some do, some of them would just be leaving Egypt.
Right.
See, that's the
Right. That's
now
my-
again. But people doubt. They're doubting Thomases, as we say, about every detail. What I want to do is I want to get in. In fact, I read Richard Elliott Friedman's book, The Exodus. He actually gets into some of this about perhaps it was a smaller number, right? Perhaps that's somewhat inflated. Or there's also a theory that the term translated thousands literally means clans. Now that is a fact, that Aleph can mean 1,000 and it can also mean a clan. There is a difference between saying that there are 603 clans versus 603,000. See?
Yes. Yes.
So these are all questions that are relative to the Exodus narrative. And some of this I want to get into at the conference in Charlotte. I want to actually have some of these discussions.
So Anita Sweet, this is good for Facebook discussion, and you got to come to the conference so we can have
There you
this
go.
kind of talk.
There you go. Yeah, I love this kind of stuff, and let me say this like a good Southern man. I ain't scared of nothing. I mean, I want to read. If somebody has an argument for or against, I'm willing to look at it all.
Right.
Because a faith untested is a faith not worth having.
You
in
might
my
not be
opinion.
scared of nothing, but you should have a little humility when it comes to large reptiles.
I do. I do.
So Ronnie jumped in and he said one of my favorite things I like to say, the Bible has many answers, we just don't always know the questions.
That's true.
You know, our questions are usually what's the problem. We ask the wrong question,
Yep,
you know.
that's
You
true.
can take that how you want,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. Look, this is the book that I've devoted my life to. I love it, and I like all the questions that it raises. I like the answers that we can get. And you know, whether there were 603,550 males or 603 clans of people, which might be more like 20,000, either way, that group of people, no matter how large or small,
big
was
group.
commanded and was commanded to treat people
Yes.
kindly.
Yeah.
So even if our numbers are off, right, one way or the other,
The principles.
the
still
principle
same.
remains.
Principle same, and, you know, our numbers can be off one way or the other, but the Creator
He knows.
can do anything He wants.
Amen.
I was went to see her the other day, and I told her, I said, you know, she was at work and there were people there. And I said, I had one of God's favorite meals at lunch. What's that? I said, I had a lamb and cheese sandwich. And we've had that discussion.
Yeah.
And one of the people said, well, why would God need to eat? I said, He can do anything He wants.
That's right.
Yep.
Everyone
He can do
experience.
anything He
Supposedly knows
wants.
how many hairs Ross and I have on our head, but I don't know.
That's a lot of hair.
I don't know, I don't know.
Well,
That's right.
it's easier to count them.
Yeah.
You know,
Hey, look, everybody, if you can make it, please make it.
Yeah.
Remember, we still have people. Sherry, just keep lifting up Sherry and her family. By the way, I'll publicize this wider, but next Saturday, we as a small community are coming together to celebrate the life of Catherine, Sherry's mom. We have to do it on Shabbat. We will not be teaching live from St. Francisville next week for that reason. And it just worked out for her family. And we want to do that for a lot of reasons. And we're honoring Catherine. Catherine was a big part of our group when we started up. She was there in that synagogue. And so it's not really something that we would do publicly, I don't think. That's up to the family. But you might say, well, why don't you do that at a different time? We've decided what we need to do, and that's what we're going to do. But I'll make sure everybody remembers that, and we'll provide something some different way. But I just wanted to say that. Also, keep Joe and Debbie good in your prayers. You know, continue to lift up Timothy. I mean, we've got a lot of people who are, that I don't even know about, who are suffering and going through some difficult times. So lift those up. Don't forget to pray for John and
Yes.
Lyndon next week, because John will be going through that
She's going to need
surgery.
more prayers than I will.
That's right. Or you might. You might.
She's got to put up with me.
No, she didn't have to. She could say, I don't know what happened. The pillow was on top
gotta
of his
work.
face.
I don't know how that happened.
So, especially if you come out with that veil. But Thursday, John will have that surgery, so keep him lifted and lift him up in your prayers. Thank you for joining us. Shabbat Shalom.
10:30.
Shabbat
Shavua Tov.
Y'all.
Have a beautiful
Shabbat.
week.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.